It's also an honor to be a part of this event. I think that this community has a noble purpose. People are not here for political or strategic purposes for themselves. People are here because they believe that every kid deserves something more. Every kid deserves the kind of education that the wealthiest kids in every one of our cultures has the privilege of having. And so people are here joining together with that sort of common mission of, I love the idea of sneaking through the hedge, getting us all, and leading other people through as well. I thought yesterday started, one of the big takeaways for me of yesterday morning was John Hattie reminding us yesterday that there is no magic structure or strategy that's going to do this for us. That, in fact, some of the structures and strategies that we most embrace, that many of us in this room are committed to, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning, in and of themselves don't fix things. In fact, they have actually a small effect if they're not embedded in a culture that's powerful. But the one thing that he pointed out that had the most powerful effect on improving achievement for all kids and narrowing the gap was when teachers get together and share honestly what's working for them and what's not working for them. When they have the candidness and candor together to be able to talk about where their struggles are and support each other in getting better. And that had a very large effect size in improving achievement for students. It was a parallel for me in the closing comments yesterday because I thought our friends from British Columbia had a really uplifting closing for us in the session of pointing out that when schools and districts do that very same thing, when they get together and openly share what's working and what's not working, in the same way that teachers do, that their entire district of the country was transformed and also brought up to the top of the world in their work. And so I think the potential of this community that's being gathered by whole education is exactly that, is people not being here for their own purposes, but here for the collective good of sharing their practices. I'm hoping that this gathering today is just a jumping off point for a lot of collaboration moving forward, of creating that community of practice that they have done in British Columbia and have it right here in the UK. And I'm happy to contribute to it in any way that I can, and my organization, Expeditionary Learning. We have no official work in the UK right now, but there is a school, the XP School, and leaders are right here today, that is taking those ideas and trying to instantiate them right here in the UK and spread that too. They have that same open-hearted vision of trying to be open source and open-hearted about everything they're doing to share these things. So enough of the introduction. Let me just share my particular passion with you today. My passion is about student work. And I use work very broadly, not just the physical work they do, but the achievements and accomplishments they do. And I believe that we vastly underestimate the capacity of students to do great things. And I'm not just talking about students of privilege. I'm talking about students in every school. And I'm not talking about students doing great things someday when they finish with school. I'm talking about second years and 10th years right now doing great things. Things that are so great that they transform their sense of who they are. Once a student is done with school, she is judged for the rest of her life, not by her ability to perform on a test of basic skills, but by the quality of her work and the quality of her character. And it doesn't matter what career choice she makes or life choice she makes. She will be judged for the rest of her life on the quality of her work and the quality of her character. So why is it in schools we actually don't spend a lot of time focusing on those two things? We spend almost all of our time focusing on preparing kids for tests. Now, I get a lot of pushback when I share that, and people say, of course we focus around quality work. Of course that matters to us in our school or our district. And then I say, can you show me some of the quality work? And they say, well, we haven't actually collected it. We don't actually have a place where we keep it. I say, can you share with me how across your school or across your district you look together and define how to assess quality work or figure out the dimensions and criteria of quality work? And they say, well, we don't actually organize, we don't do that as a school or as a district, but teachers do grade work. And you realize they're not actually focused on it. They're not focused on work and character at all, and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the pressures of where they're being pushed, which is, that's not what we're saying matters. And I'm suggesting a very different approach. I'm suggesting that we should be focusing in our schools and districts on the quality of what students do and the quality of who they are. That should be what we're digging into. That should be the conversations we're having on the school level, on the district level, and on the network level like this community. Rather than just talk about it, my particular passion is the work itself. So I'm just going to actually share it with you. I want to look at great work with you and talk about how different it is when we look at what kids can actually achieve. All the work I share with you today comes from schools in low-income communities. The organization I work with is 20 years old, Expeditionary Learning. It was formed from a marriage of one of our universities, Harvard University in my state, Massachusetts, and Outward Bound USA. And Outward Bound USA was born from Outward Bound UK, which is the organization that brings people into the wilderness to compel them to do more than they thought possible, to get to the top of the mountain together, where every person is pushing themselves beyond what they thought possible. We have taken the metaphor of Outward Bound and brought it into the school to say we are capable of doing way more than we thought possible. And we're going to sweat and cry in the process, frankly, but we're going to get there together. And this is what that might look like. So I'm going to start with a project. The project I'm going to start with is a project done by third years. This school, which is in Boston, Massachusetts, is a school of low-income students that uses the expeditionary learning approach to do interdisciplinary studies, investigations into a topic. These particular second graders were doing an interdisciplinary study of snakes. And every interdisciplinary study, every expedition we do, requires kids to contribute something of value to the world beyond their classroom. And in this case, students decided to create an ebook to share knowledge of snakes with other kids. So every student did a page in this ebook where they took a snake that they had independently researched and did an accurate scientific drawing of that snake. And then through their research, they created a narrative day in the life of what that snake's life was, so they could share all the scientific information about the snake's life in a way that would be compelling for younger readers. Because it is an ebook, it's also interactive. So if you were to get this book on your iPad or online, you could click on any page and you would hear the student himself or herself narrating their narrative writing. And you would also hear sound effects that those students brought in as a background. And you'd also hear musical background that the students brought in. And if you heard the musical background, you would know that the music was actually composed by the students themselves and played by the students themselves. And let me remind you, these are 8-year-olds. So let's look at one of these. This is the Fer-de-Lance, created by Gavin.
Fer-de-Lance Viper in the Amazon River by Gavin Briggs. One June morning, the sun rises over the Amazon River. The sound of cicadas and the loud honking of macaws and parakeets consume the air. A warm breeze sweeps into the mangrove forest. Male bullfrogs and red-eyed tree frogs slowly begin to stop croaking. Howler monkeys start to call in a Mark My Territory choir. The winding vines overflow the canopy. Spider monkeys swing from vine to vine. A young 10-inch long Fer-de-Lance viper wiggles out of his mother's belly and streaks out of her way. He slithers off into the canopy. His diamond-patterned scales shine in the sunlight as he slithers off in search of a suitable place to live. After a while, he curls up for a good nap. When he wakes, he is hungry, so he slithers off. He creeps closer and closer to a red-eyed tree frog. Bang! Bang! Within a second, he strikes. His fangs pierce the frog's skin as he slowly inches his mouth up the frog's slimy body. Then he rests on a nearby branch to digest. He wakes up suddenly as a harpy eagle comes swooping down. Fer-de-Lance freezes. Bam! He strikes. As the venom pours into the eagle's body, destroying its veins and arteries, the bird gets skinnier and skinnier. It falls out of the tree and lands with a thump. After a while, Fer-de-Lance finds a hole in a tree near the Amazon River and checks if there's anybody inside. It's empty, so he slithers into the hole and gets himself cozy. Soon he will need to shed. For now, he curls up and sleeps motionless with his eyes wide open.
So, I don't know about you, but if my 8-year-old son or grandson was doing that at age 8, I couldn't be more impressed. There's a whole lot of different kinds of quality that you see entering that. But the short message is that I have not seen students in any of the most privileged schools in America doing work of that quality. The schools where people spend £20,000 a year to send their children to school are not doing work in this quality. This quality is coming from schools with the students in the lowest socioeconomic status in America. This is why I think we vastly underestimate what kids can do. And when I show this kind of slide to people, people say, oh, yeah, but you chose just the one special kid in class. And I'm not going to go through having Tiago read his piece, or any of these people read their piece. But I think you get the sense that he's not an anomaly in this classroom. Rather than talk about the qualities of why every student in this classroom is doing work that is brilliant, I'm going to take you into that classroom through video. So last year, I took my colleague, who is a video expert and a teacher, and had him spend time in the classroom as this project was being created. And he created a series of 6 short videos. I'll show you one. This is just video 4 in a series of 6 of why this work is of different quality than we typically see in a school.
Baby African rock python soon passes a river, and a giant, starving, scaly crocodile rises out of the green water on its big, short legs and bounds toward her. Crocodiles are her predators.
Turn around. Well, this is a pretty cool.
When students are feeling excited and empowered by what they are learning, it creates the right conditions for producing really high-quality work. And getting really high-quality work from every student means they have to go through a process of critique and revision. We began thinking about our scientifically accurate drawings of our snakes by looking at models done by kids from earlier years.
What are some stars we could give about Goodness's snake shape? Some compliments, some kind critique. Maxwell.
I like how he wrote the head and the tail where it's supposed to be.
Students worked on one aspect of illustration at a time, starting with their snake shape.
I want you to now think about stairs. What are some stairs, some things that he could work towards in his next draft? Turn and talk.
Yeah, and I think he should make the head, because it kind of looks like it's sagging down, so it could make it a little bit round.
I wanted students to not only understand how to look carefully like scientists at the work, but also be able to enhance their ability to give critique and feedback by using our rubrics.
Okay, if the target's met, that means that every single place that the lines are smooth. Do you see some smooth lines? Where did you
Where do you see some smooth lines? Okay. Do you see smooth lines everywhere? Can you point a few lines where they're not so smooth? Okay, so did she hit the target for that? Okay, so is she getting started?
I've been traveling around the country for the past 10 years with a story called Austin's Butterfly about the power of critique and feedback. And that story has become a phenomenon in a way. It has taken off internationally. Tens of thousands of students and teachers have found it a provocation to create beautiful work.
It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this? No,
And people often ask me, what would it look like if that Austin's Butterfly process was always there in a classroom? What could a classroom look like? And I'm not sure I've ever seen a classroom that's a better example of that than this classroom.
Would you agree that the size, how wide the
We have
snake
3
is
things
the
that we
same
always
until it
ask
gets to
kids
the
to do
tail?
when we're doing a critique. Be kind, be specific, and be helpful. And after the kids practiced, we began the process of going back and critiquing each other's work. And what I find is that in the beginning, kids are really great about being kind.
I like that you made like the tail, because I can see in the picture that it goes up.
So at the beginning, we don't see a lot of very helpful or specific feedback. Over time, as kids do this, and we're talking about over several weeks, as they practice, critique, and their drawings improve, you can see that the kids begin to recognize the value of that specific and helpful feedback.
Like right here is like more wider, so one thing I do to get it in proportion, I go like that, and then I go like that, and then I erase the lines, and then I just make it how my fingers were. And the nugget of space here should be a little bit smaller. And the negative space here could be bigger. So
I also needed to be able to sit with kids individually to help them improve their ability to give critique. So I needed a process in my classroom to give kids more independence in their work.
But some of you yesterday finished a draft and were really hoping to get some critique from peers. For example, Marguerite finished one of her snake shapes. So Marguerite would find her name. This is Marguerite Asian Rock Python. And what Marguerite would do is she would move her name to being ready for a peer critique. Anybody else who's ready for a peer critique would move their name to ready for a peer critique.
I've used the project board with kids for a long time, and that helps them become the co-managers of the critique process. They can see where anyone is in the classroom at any time, and I can see where anyone is in the classroom at any time, and then they can choose a partner to go and do critique with. It's great because it means kids aren't always going to their friends. It's great because they can take more ownership over the critique process themselves. Over time, we focused on other physical features like scales, patterns, and color. And along the way, we worked with different experts who taught the kids specific techniques.
So sometimes we're going to see just plain old circles. Sometimes you see ovals. Ooh. Oh my goodness, like perfectly perpendicular diamonds, like that?
And for each new aspect of their illustration, we created a rubric and had opportunities for critique and feedback.
I like how your scales are going to the direction of where the body is. Like something that you can work on, like a stair, is trying to make all the scales the same size. Not like smaller. I had to make them big because you know how it's facing towards Toronto.
Getting kids to do their best work is what learning expeditions are all about. It's not just about doing it when we're doing our high-quality artwork. We take the same process, then we can apply it to the way we craft our written stories. Or in our school, we can do the same thing when we think about all the music that's essential in our school. Learning how to do your best work and learning that that happens through a process of critique and revision is very empowering for students. It sets them up for success in any academic or personal venture in the future.
Instead of a triangle. But just make it a little bit bigger, not just that bump. Yeah. Not really bigger. See.
Take a moment, let's say 2 minutes, turn to somebody sitting next to you. What do you notice in that video? What strikes you? Thank you. Let me give you just a little backstory for this. This is a school in the center of Boston. It's not a school that Expeditionary Learning opened. This is a school like most of our schools that was a school that was low or middle performing, and we were asked to come in and help them improve. We didn't handpick the teachers. We didn't handpick the school. We don't say yes all the time, but we never say no to that kind of partnership because the school is struggling. We only say no if the teachers and leadership of that school are not really willing to embrace change, to make mistakes together and be bold together. If they're willing to dive in deeply with us, we will take that on. I was fortunate because I was the personal coach for this school when we did that transformation. I went to Boston and worked with these teachers. And the very first transformation that has to happen is not about the kids and their standards, it's about the teachers. So what we had to do is transform the culture of that building by building a sense of what we in EL call crew among those teachers. Crew is a word that comes from Outward Bound, and it comes from a quote by the founder of Outward Bound, Kurt Hahn, who said, "We are crew, not passengers. We're not on a cruise ship here. We're all working together. We're all trying to get there together." And if we hope that students will have that sense of crew, we first need to build a faculty culture where teachers have that sense of crew. So my job as a coach for this school was to come in and build a sense of crew among teachers, which is not easy. We had to sit in circles and discuss their hopes and dreams, their challenges and their weaknesses, and there was anger and there was tears at first over wounds from the past at this school. But people were willing to move beyond that and build some bonds that summer, where when the students came, they modeled that sense of crew, that this school is about values of doing this together. And it's not possible to do any of this work without building the kind of relational trust among the faculty of the school so that teachers are willing to dive in with kids to do this kind of work. Fortunately, this staff really did dive in with this work together and went on the slow journey toward this. This video you see was 4 years after we began working with the school. So I don't want you to think we came in September and by November this is what they were doing. But I will say that after 4 years, this is one of the best schools in the city and state, even though it's low-income students. And so if we can have the patience that people have in Japan, for example, and not expect that change happens instantly, because change is built through the cultural process of building bonds among faculty, having faculty be able to have that growth mindset that was discussed yesterday, take risks together, that's the only way that will work. Just blocks away from the school I just spoke about is a secondary school. This is a school that we actually happen to open as an expeditionary learning school. This is a school where 100% of the students are low income, just about 100% are African American. It's in a neighborhood in Boston where not too many kids graduate from high school, a little over 50%. For 10 consecutive years, every single graduate of this school has gone to university. Let me say that again. 10 consecutive years, every single graduate of this school has gone to university. These are the same kids in the same neighborhood going to the same, those failing schools. It's not about the kids. It's not a lack in the kids. It's a lack in us providing this kind of environment to get them there. This school not only has gotten every single student into university, but their persistence rate in the university is 80%. Now, I wish it were 100%, but persistence rate is the word we use in the US to, did they actually make it through university? And let me tell you, the persistence rate in the US for students from this demographic, even those students that we managed to get into university, is 11%. So if you are a low-income student of color in the States and you get into university and you actually matriculate, your chances of graduating are 11%. These students, every one of them is getting into university and 80% of them are graduating. and it is the same kids. I will say, though, that they have a different mission in this school than I had when I was in high school. So when I was in high school, my mission was to get myself into university, just me. And in fact, if my peers did poorly, it actually helped me, because my grade point average would be better the worse they did. There was no incentive whatsoever for me to look beyond myself. In this school, every morning, kids meet in a crew of a dozen other kids. And in that crew, their job is to make sure that none of their crewmates are straying, academically, personally, emotionally, as human beings or as workers. To be candid, it's kind of like an AA group. I was at this school last week in a crew. This school happens to have something we don't usually have, a single gender crew structure. So they have boys' crews and girls' crews. I sat with a boys' crew and I sat with a girls' crew. And I listened to them. And teachers don't always know when kids are straying. They don't always know when they're skipping school, well, they know when they're skipping school, but they don't know after school if they're joining a gang or using drugs or getting into trouble, but the other kids know. And so when they do their go-around in the morning, they hold each other accountable to staying on the right path. They push each other, they open up to each other, they cry in crew, they talk about their strengths in crew, they celebrate in crew. And they do that with the same group of kids every morning for 4 years, and that same crew leader. That crew leader knows their mother, or if they're not living with their mother, they know their grandmother or their uncle. If they don't show up at school, the crew leader will call the grandmother's house or show up there. We make sure that there is that teamwork, that sense of crew for every one of these students. And they see their mission in school totally different than I did. They don't feel like they've succeeded unless they've gotten all of their peers into college together. It is the outward bound spirit of, we're getting up the mountain, but it's not you that's getting up the mountain. It's the entire team that's getting up the mountain. Otherwise, you failed. And so when we opened that school, we took everyone on an outward bound trip, the teachers and leaders. And they cried and struggled together in the mud and in the rain, and were miserable and overwhelmed and hated us and hated the school. And at the end of the week, they felt heroic and they felt like they were a team. And then they started the school and took all the students on an outward bound trip, and the students were miserable. And then made it and felt like we're a team together. Our next mountain is college, university, for us to do together. And I will say that just this August, here in the UK, the XP School from Doncaster went as a staff to Aberdyfi, Wales. For those of you in the room yesterday, I said Scotland, I'm so sorry. Went to Aberdyfi, Wales, and the teachers and school leaders went on an outward bound trip together, and they were miserable and overwhelmed and triumphant at the end. And then school opened, and they immediately took all the kids there. And the kids were miserable and overwhelmed and scared and cried and screamed and were afraid and made it through and feel proud together. Now, but it's not about the wilderness or the ocean. It's about that common mission together. It's about we're in this together. I will share, without outing anybody too much, that when I brought a visitor through a school and asked about a young woman, our ambassador tour guide's outward bound experience, she said, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. And our guest said, what made it hard? And she said, no cosmetics for a whole week, no mirror. I had no idea what my hair looked like. The XP teachers were like, no beer for a week? You don't think that was hard? We in EL feel like there is a power more powerful in all of us than our own hope to succeed in ourselves. And that's the power in all of us to want to contribute something of value. That there is a virtuous part of each one of us that would like to do good for the world. We want to do things that we're proud of. And so our ethic in schools is we are trying to get kids to be smart to do good. Not to be smart to get rich. Not to be smart to get famous. but to be smart, to do good. And so if you ask kids, why are they working so hard? Because they are working much harder than kids in other schools. Otherwise, they wouldn't be going to university, obviously. What's making them work so hard? They are on a mission to contribute, to do good for the world. If you ask them why they want to go to university, they say, I want to help my family, I want to help my community, I want to contribute to a better world. I know it sounds cheesy and corny, but that power is greater than the power of succeed for yourself. Because you know if you go into a secondary school of low-income kids and say, work hard so you'll succeed, only a few of them work hard. Many of them feel like, I'm not motivated and you can't motivate me. When the motivation is beyond themselves, when it's to contribute to the world in some way, they are willing to work with a whole different energy and heart. And so our mission is tie the learning of kids to something of value, to something of importance. Have the culminating projects of your work contribute in some small way, a beautiful poem, a beautiful piece of art, a concert, or a big way, changing your local community. So that kids feel like we are studying our history and our maths, we are studying our writing so that we can give something of value. Like the interactive ebook that's now free to kids all over the world, created by those third years. Let me give an example of that from what we would say is middle school. This is a project by 8th years in Portland, Maine, and it's a project that contributed by having students go from their school into their community and interview people who contributed to the civil rights movement in the United States. These people were not famous. They had selflessly been a part of the civil rights movement and no one knew their stories. These kids researched them, found them, interviewed them, and created a series of books for the State Archive to honor them. I should say that in addition to doing work of beauty, this school also succeeds in standard measures. It has the lowest socioeconomic population of any middle school in the state of Maine, the poorest school in the state. 1/3 of the students are foreign-born refugee students. There's 31 languages spoken in this school. This is probably the most difficult school in the state to teach in. And yet, every grade level, which we would say 6th, 7th, and 8th, or 7th, 8th, and 9th years, exceeds the state on the state tests in every single subject, every single year. So let me just repeat that. This has the most difficult demographic in the entire state, and it beats the state at every subject, every year, on every test. I think when you watch a short video of these students doing this project, you'll see why these kids are succeeding.
But you're from Arkansas. And I grew up in black major. Hi.
Good morning.
Hello and thank you so much for coming. In Windsor 7, we've been working on an expedition called Small Acts of Courage. This expedition focused on the civil rights movement in the United States and the local community members whose small acts needed to be captured for all to read.
Today we just finished our culminating event for our expedition, Small Acts of Courage. This is an expedition that focused on the civil rights movement, and we studied the civil rights movement and major events in the movement, and then students interviewed local citizens who participated in some way or had some connection to the civil rights movement.
Our presentation today is dedicated to our interviewees. We thank you for your time, and we thank you for your stories.
Today, as part of our culminating event, we presented our work to parents, but most importantly, to the interviewees, so that they could see the work that the students completed in their oral history collection, and they could hear the words of the students as they paid tribute to their interviewees.
Ida Marie Gammon-Wilson's Small Acts of Courage contributed greatly to the civil rights movement.
In college, she joined students practicing for the Nashville sit-ins. They practiced how they would handle segregation at the lunch counter. They also practiced ways to stay nonviolent.
Ida was a part of the Nashville sit-ins and also helped other students get a diploma by taking their places in their classes and helping them study if they missed opportunities to get information.
Throughout the sit-ins, Ida courageously worked behind the scenes to keep students in school and on the front lines of the integration effort. Ida remains active in civil rights today, as well as gay and women's rights. She is a great inspiration.
I think this expedition works because, first of all, the content is extremely compelling for students.
With boundaries to the Board of Education.
Their experience with the interviewees creates an emotional connection to the content that they cannot get in the classroom and really motivates them to work hard, to write their stories, and to present their work to their interviewees.
Julia Adams is a selfless woman who accomplished a lot in her lifetime. During her senior year, she befriended Josephine Boyd, the only African-American student in the newly integrated school.
She went over to Josephine Boyd and asked her to sit with her and her friends at lunch. This was an act of kindness that would change both of their lives forever.
Taking a courageous stand has had an impact on Julia's life. One day, a woman with a baseball bat was looking for her at school because she felt Julia shouldn't be helping Josephine.
Years later, Greensboro High School honored Josephine for being the first black student to integrate the school, and at the ceremony, Julia Adams gave a speech. Even today, Julia Adams can be found helping others.
We want to set every student up for success. So we had a rubric involved. I taught kids how to stand correctly. We talked about eye contact, volume, speaking slowly and clearly, and we practiced those skills in my classroom. There also was rehearsing, where we took the students through the process of what would happen at the culminating event, and it all felt very familiar to them today.
Windsor 7 is honored to present our 4-volume collection of oral histories related to the Civil Rights Movement to the African American Collection of Maine. Thank you for supporting us throughout this project.
Sometimes it's not possible to get every student in front of an audience. So it's important to build in some structure where students can celebrate their work and share their work with a significant adult. And we often find a reception after the event really works well for this.
You know, it's really wonderful to find that something small that you did has an impact on the next generation.
It felt good to do it. Her story was important because she helped Josephine Boyd become the first African American to integrate Greensboro High School, and her story needs to be heard.
Culminating events are a time when every student's work is celebrated, where every student has the opportunity to be a part of their individual success and the group success.
It was an honor, I guess, to be able to present her story to her and show her how much she actually affected people.
And to have their work appreciated and to share that with the community and to realize their work is a part of something much bigger.
Textbooks are often behind the times. They do not reflect how we are and where we've come from and where we've come to. And this kind of presentation by these young people, I think, would be just an absolute wonderful experience for everybody to have, because we are making some strides in this nation.
This is not a trade-off we need to make. We work with 165 schools, and they outperform the comparable schools in the US by big margins. It's not like we're choosing deep, important, beautiful work at the expense of success on standard measures. The very schools that do the best in this project work are the most successful across the board, as you would imagine. An independent, a third-party study done by a US firm, Mathematica, determined that after 3 years, a student in one of our schools gains an entire extra year of academic growth over students in a comparable school. So don't believe that by going deep and caring deeply about the quality of what kids do, you're sacrificing the current currency of what people say matters. The structures that John Hattie spoke about, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, and problem learning, are not powerful in and of themselves. But they are powerful, you can see here, when they're nested in a school culture of contribution and service and a total obsession with quality. So I hope you see that pairedness here of these kids are on a mission to change the world and do good, but they're being held to the absolute highest standards, higher than in the privileged independent schools for the quality of what they do. I'm going to end with a 2-minute video. It comes from that same classroom of kids working on snakes. In the course of studying snakes, these students discovered that snakes are oppressed. They know that people should not be oppressed, but they learned that snakes are oppressed in our country. Let me tell you why, since this isn't a snake-rich country here. In the US, nobody seems to like snakes. Every fable is critical of snakes. They're always the bad guys. In the Bible, snakes are the bad guys. In almost every religion, snakes are the bad guys. People, when they find snakes, they just kill them. And people say, good, you killed a snake. These kids felt indignant, and they felt like they needed to mount a political campaign to say, snakes, this is not snakes' fault. This is who they are as beings on this planet. So they discussed different methods. They could write op-eds, they could do PSAs, like how do they get this out? And they came up with the idea of, if we created a music video about snakes, perhaps it will go viral and convince the world. Now, we try to explain that not every music video goes viral. But fortunately, they didn't listen, and they created a music video, and it went viral. It's been seen more than 50,000 times. I'll show you a shortened version, a 2-minute version of that video. But I will say that the video went through the same Austin's butterfly process as everything they did. It went through draft after draft, outside experts, planning. And so when you see this video, you don't think, oh my God, they made a cute little 2nd grade video. You think, oh my God, they made a professional quality video as 8-year-olds. And then that will be the close, and Tony will bring our panel up.
It doesn't matter if you're scared of them or not. Just open up your heart, because snakes were just born this way.
That was great.
That was actually great.